This episode is brought to you by O.H. Ingram River Aged Whiskey. O.H. Ingram River Aged is the only whiskey in the world aged in a floating barrel house on the Mississippi River. The constant motion of the river combines with its distinct microclimate to provoke a unique interaction between the whiskey and the barrel that is unachievable in a traditional barrel house. The Mississippi's powerful current, its humidity and extreme temperature fluctuations ensure that the whiskey never stops working inside those barrels. It is a modern innovation inspired by tradition. Please visit ingramwhiskey.com to learn more and find your closest retailer. That's ingramwhiskey.com. A message from our sponsor, the Maritime Throwdown. We're excited to announce the Maritime Throwdown's 2023 Regional Series. This industrial maritime skills competition is a great opportunity for inland mariners to demonstrate their skills in a safe and controlled environment. We aspire to foster the teamwork and communication essential to safety in the workplace while recruiting the crews of tomorrow. But the benefits don't stop there. We'll be visiting a minimum of 3 port cities where crews can attend training days and have the chance to compete in the Maritime Throwdown's regional qualifier. The finals will be held on May 31st at the Inland Marine Expo in Nashville with over $10,000 in prizes. Inland towing operators and maritime industry stakeholders will have opportunities to sponsor our events, so it's a great chance to network and connect with others in the field while building brand awareness. Join us in promoting safety and sustainability in the maritime industry and recruiting the next generation of passionate mariners. Contact us by email today at maritimethrowndown@gmail.com to schedule your training days during the 2023 Regional Series. I am joined today on Between the Levees by a gentleman whose name speaks for itself and who needs no introduction. I will not bore you with any such thing. Mr. Orrin Ingram, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Normally in these episodes, I will ask where you were born and when and all that jazz, but I believe the Ingram story started about 2 generations prior.
Right.
Can you tell me about your great-grandfather?
My father's side of the family started actually in the timber business and logging in the Northeast, and they got the timber to the mills via the waterway. My grandmother's side of the family was in the insurance business, but our family really much more follows the river than it does insurance.
What was the development of business and the entrepreneurial spirit on your grandfather's side?
He did a lot of different things. He had a carpet making business, which is actually how he got to Tennessee. He dabbled in oil. We were involved again in the timber business. Actually, sold our interest to a warehouser. But he was in. My dad and his brother got into a little bit of blue water shipping, mostly coastwise oil tanking. They were involved in gas stations. We had Ingram gas station that ultimately sold to Spur, which got bought out. The barge company roots really started back in 1946, where our family partnered with the Koch family on a refinery up just near St. Louis, Wood River. Those in the marine business know, particularly the liquid business, know about Wood River. And we were partners with Koch. And then my family and the Koch family decided to go different ways. And so we kept the barging side of the business. They kept the terminaling side of the business. Although in the 70s, we dabbled back into the refining business. We we're building a big refinery down in Louisiana, which is now the Marathon Garyville facility. And luckily, Marathon bought it from us because we bit off a little bit more than we could chew at the time, and we were promised a bunch of money from the government, and the administration changed, and the promises disappeared. And that's why we've always, to this day, been very skeptical on promises made, because they can always change when the administrations change, even if it's in writing.
Can you tell me how your family got into the oil business and then how that branched off into barging?
Well, again, we started with the joint venture with the Koch family with the refinery. I think it was a 35,000 barrel a day refinery. We were producing a lot of diesel fuel for the war effort. After the war was over, St. Louis couldn't absorb all the product that we were producing, and we got into the barging and terminaling business, really to market our product in other areas. And then, as I said earlier, the Koch family and the Ingram family decided to go different directions. We kept the barging side of the business. They kept the refining part of the business. Back then, we were just in the petroleum transportation business, but in the early 60s, we bought a company called the Barrett Line, and that company moved stone, primarily riprap, for Corps of Engineers jobs. And that's how we got into the dry cargo side of the business. So then we were fledgling dry cargo, we were petroleum. In 1976, one of the most important contracts that was ever inked in Ingram history was the Commonwealth Edison contract, where we moved number 6 residual fuel oil from the Gulf down at the IMTT refinery or tank facility, all the way up to Collins Station, which was just south of Chicago. And we built 48 unit tow barges and 6 boats to move that product. And luckily, it was a day rate contract. We got paid, including fuel, whether we moved or didn't move. And thank goodness that happened, because one of the mistakes we made was we decided to get bigger in the dry cargo side of the business, and we were going to move coal for export. We thought that was going to be, or actually my dad thought that was going to be a really big thing, and we built a bunch of new hopper barges, and we started a coal company. The problem was this happened in the late 70s, late 70s, early 80s, and the barge business became terrible. The coal company could move coal below our variable cost, and we were in a real bind. And Dad had a decision to make. We had brand new equipment. We had no traffic patterns, at least on the dry cargo side. And we either needed to get out of the business or get bigger. He tells the kids that because I liked the barge business, I'd been a deckhand in summers at that time. And it was before I guess I just started, finished college and started in the business working for Ingram Materials, our sand company. Dad wouldn't let me go in the barge business because it was so bad. He didn't want me to get disenchanted with it. But anyway, we bought Ohio Barge Line, which was U.S. Steel's barge line, in 1984. And with that, we got a bunch of things. We got a much better balanced age profile of their fleet. So everything went brand new as they built all along. Really importantly, we got good contracts. And maybe Dad would always say, most important of all, we got a really good senior management team. And that was a big turning point for the barge company. And we became, one of the bigger barge lines in the industry. And after Ohio Barge Line, I started getting a little bit more involved, and we bought ABT. We bought a couple smaller tank barge companies in December of 2002, I believe. We did the biggest buy, and Dad, by the way, died in 1995. But in December of 2002, we made the biggest deal we'd ever made in our company history. We bought Ohio River Company. And we were at the time number 3, and they were number 2. And 1983 was the worst year we ever had in the barge business. And there were some people wondering whether we'd done the right thing or not. Luckily, in 2004, the business turned. We got quite profitable, and looking back at it, it was a good deal for us. After that, we bought. Well, I guess before that, we bought ABT. We bought some tank barges from Arthur Smith. We bought some tank barges before we bought Ohio River Company from Ohio River Company.
So, I guess as per my normal practice, tell me where you were born.
I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Where are you?
I was. A little bit of trivia is our father, I'm the oldest. Our father, I have two other brothers and a sister. We're all a year apart. Mother was busy for a while. But anyway, at that time, Orrin, me, and my brother John, who's a year younger, we were the only two in New Orleans. Dad realized he was being transferred up to Nashville. Really, Mother wanted to raise the family in Nashville. We had aunts and uncles up there, all on my dad's side. But anyway, I was a little bit over a year old, and John was just born, and our house burnt down. And because my parents knew that they were going to be relocating to Nashville, they didn't want to buy another house. So my grandfather had a boat. And so I spent about the whole year or two of my life on a boat. So I started boating early in life. Then we moved to Nashville, and here I'm still in Nashville.
Sure. And was your father in the oil business at the time?
Yes, my father and his brother at that time were in the oil business. We built a lot of the water part of the Alaskan pipeline. We had integrated petroleum tanker tug units that were intracoastal. We had an oil trading company called Tampamex. So yes, we were quite involved in the oil business. We had an oil concession in Indonesia. We didn't own all of it. We owned a part of it. Dad and his brothers split their businesses up in '78. Our dad kept the book business and the barge business. My uncle took the Tampamex, the oil trading business, integrated tug business. We had some shipyards in England. He kept that. And I think that was about, I guess we had Ingram, our family kept Ingram Materials. After that, Dad got into the nonstandard auto insurance business. He bought into a company, a 50-50 partnership with another family from Texas that built what they call Christmas trees, valves for oil and gas rigs. After Dad died, we sold the insurance business. Our partners in the wellhead business wanted to own it themselves and go their own way. And I wasn't wild about the non-standard auto insurance business. We sold all of that. And along the way, took Ingram Micro, our computer distribution company, public. And then with a lot of those funds, we ended up buying out my sister and one of my brothers, and we began rolling up barge lines, and that's how we got the capital to be able to make all the acquisitions that we made.
Where did the book business originate?
It began in the early '70s, and a guy that was a friend of my father's, didn't work for us, came to him and needed some capital to start a textbook distribution company within the state of Tennessee. And he ended up not being able to come up with his part of the money. And so Dad ended up buying him out. Had another person that he'd hired to run it who convinced him that it made sense to expand into not just textbooks, but into all other books. And that business ended up becoming the largest book business in the country, book distribution business in the country.
Is that still to this day? How does the business
It's
progress in a world online?
Yeah, it's the largest book wholesaler in the country. Amazon actually is the largest bookseller in the country, and they're our largest customer now. Interestingly, when Amazon began, we were going to be their sole distributor. We were their credit. They were brand new, and a .com company. Banks didn't really want to loan them a lot of money. We gave them the credit to grow their book business, and I wish we'd have taken some warrants in the early stages, because it would have been very valuable. As it is now, they're our largest customer, so we still came out well.
I think they've done okay.
Yeah, they've done well.
What about schooling in Tennessee? Were you drawn to anything academically growing up?
No. In fact, that was one of the big struggles, one of the few arguments my father and I got into. I wanted to start work right away, and he told me I couldn't until I got a degree. I started going out on the boats when I was 18, which is how old you had to be at the time, and working summers. When I was in college, it was back in the day of the single sideband radio, and I'd come in and help take traffic starting at 6 in.the.morning before classes. And then after my classes, I'd come back and help dispatch. So I always really wanted to, I love the barge business a lot more than I like traditional school. Now, since then, I've been lucky enough to be on the board of trust at Vanderbilt. I went to college again, but this time as a board of director rather than as a student. And I realized, I'm probably missed out on a lot. But on the other hand, my dad died when I was very young, and the experiences that I got by starting work early, I would never trade for anything.
Tell me what you can about your decking experience.
Well, most everybody that was around when I was around, they're not alive anymore. But Gus Halbambitis was my first boss. He was second mate at the time, but I worked for him. And Erna Honeycutt, who's still around, was one of my first impactful captains. And Gus was a workaholic. He was a really hard worker, and I felt I had something to prove, because everybody thought because I was a boss's kid, that I'd sit back and stay in the wheelhouse. And I always tried to work harder than Gus, which was impossible, but I at least think I worked about as hard as he did. And even when we were making tow and stuff, even if I wasn't on watch, a lot of times I'd go and help. I remember Erna believed in making miles. Maybe it was a little bit before we were quite so safety conscious, because he'd start heading out when we were still on lines instead of wires, making miles. And we've certainly changed how we operate these days, and we needed to. But those were some very impactful days of my life. I still look back on them with a lot of happiness. In fact, I'll tell you, I hope he won't mind. Gus is one of the reasons why, ever since I've been involved in a leadership position, we've tried never to have layoffs. Sometimes we may not hire, but Gus got laid off in the early 80s. Well, actually, probably the mid 80s, 84, 85. When times were tough. And he called me one day, and he was the hardest worker I'd ever been around in my life. He called me and said, "Man, I can't support my family. I'm about to lose my house. What do I have to do to get back to work? All I want to do is get a paycheck." And John Donnelly was running the barge line at the time. I was still in school. And I went up to his office and I said, "Look, we can't lay off people that are like Gus. I mean, our company is the life to these guys, and they give us so much. We've got to change what we're doing." And actually, that's one reason why we say we want to be a family company, and our people are what really make us successful. Our people are what have made us successful, and we're only as good as the people that we surround ourselves with.
Yes, sir. Where were you running at the time when you were on deck?
My dad, while I never reported directly to him, he had influence behind the scenes. So I worked on the Donnelly when it came out, and that's where Erna and Gus were my bosses. I worked on the ComEd unit tows going up. So I ran the lower on some of the triple screws that we still have, the Hart, the Hooker, the Bigelow. And then I worked on some of the smaller 4000s when we were on the Illinois River, the Johnson, and the Benedict were the two that were in at that time. I worked on the upper a little bit, but didn't get that far up. Yeah, obviously been on it a lot more after that, but mostly the lower and the Illinois. And it's a time when we didn't buy OBL until 84. So I was already in the office by 84, and we weren't on the Ohio River at all. I obviously was on the Cumberland River some when I was working in Ingram Materials, but I'd say the main rivers were the lower and the Illinois and the little bit of the upper to get to the Illinois and the Cumberland.
Okay. How long were you decking?
18, 19, 20, three summers.
And was the plan ever to move up into the wheelhouse or the engine room?
No, because really my glide path didn't allow me to stay out on the river that long. And I needed to be on the river to understand how the river worked, but then I could have more impact actually in the office than I could have out on the boats. Although I loved it, I really did love it.
And how did your career develop in the office?
Well, I started at Ingram Materials because I couldn't go to the barge company. I did that for 2 years working in sales. And then I finally convinced my dad to let me go to the barge line. And I worked for a guy named Dick Tomeko doing planning and analysis. And then I got into liquid sales. And then I got into liquid operations. And then I got into overall operations, not to the extent that Aaron is now, but got exposed to it. And then I went back and took over all the sales. And then my dad died, and all of a sudden, I went from being I think an assistant vice president to being an owner, and had to assume a bit of a different role. Although we had CEOs at the time, but I was much more involved in decision making at the planning level, more the strategy level, because it was our family's money we were spending.
Was your brother John involved in the barge company?
John and David both worked out on the boats for a summer or two, probably not to the extent I did. We worked in all the different businesses when we were young. Dad, he said, a month the summer you're mine, the rest of the summer you can do what you want to do. And so at least when we were 14 we started. By the time I was 18 I was working more than a month, and then by the time I was in college I was pretty much working full-time, part-time.
So along the way, sir, at some point you were married, and I believe you have a few children. Can you tell me about that?
I'll tell you about my children.
Okay.
I'll tell you about my kids.
Sure.
I have 3 great kids. I have Hank, I have Aaron, whose last name happens to be Barrett. He's my kid too. And then Virginia's my daughter. And Hank and Aaron are 12 hours apart, and they actually both are involved in the barge business with us. Aaron in operation, and Hank is more helping us think about where we want to go next, how to get into how to diversify what we're doing a little bit. Hank is very entrepreneurial, and Aaron is very steady, and they both have their strengths, and they're both, I think, right now playing into their strengths.
And what is your daughter up to?
She is in college still, getting her master's degree. So she's still in education, but she just got engaged. So we'll see what happens going forward. At this time, I don't think she'll come into the business, though. She's more into dealing with art.
Okay. What does the future of the business look like? I know we have a whiskey venture and an international shipping arm now.
Yeah, well, the whiskey venture is all Hank. The company actually has nothing to do with that other than leasing Hank two barges. Um, Hank wrote his thesis in business school on make aging whiskey on the river, and actually turned it into business. He went out and raised the capital to finance it, and he's done a good job. So again, he's entrepreneurial and he's creative. Where Aaron, has spent his whole life in the barge business and is most interested in the operation side. I think has a lot of respect of the people that are out on the river and the people that are in the office, and he's doing a good job. So what does the future hold? Well, we're definitely still committed to the barge business. I've got two sons in it. If we weren't committed to it, I certainly wouldn't encourage them to be in it. But we are trying to diversify where we're not just in the barge business. We're looking at container on barge. We're looking at all kinds of different logistics stuff that we can do. The barge business is a cyclical business, and as we've sold some other businesses and concentrated more and more in the barge business, we need to find some adjacencies that may not have the same cycle as when barge stuff goes bad. And I think we're in an upcycle for a while now. I mean, new construction's crazy. The highways and railroads are chock-a-block full. I think we're in for some good years. But anytime the business gets too bad, people that don't know the business jump in and screw it up. So I think just to be wise planning for the future, you don't want all your eggs in one basket. You want to have other things that hopefully will still be good when barging is bad. And if barging's really good, if the other things are bad, it's not as important either. So that's what we're trying to do, is to find balance. We never want to bet the farm on anything. And I think that's good for everyone that works for us, because getting that paycheck is really important.
Yes, sir. Well, switching topics then. What do you like to do in all that spare time I'm sure you are looking for all the time?
Well, I've done a lot of different things. I mean, I've done a lot of nonprofit stuff. I helped start the Vanderbilt Ingram Cancer Center. I was chairman of the United States Polo Association. But today, I'm spending time an hour south of Nashville in a rural area on a farm with my significant other, who's very special to me. And she raises British Labradors and one of the best breeders in the whole world, actually, on Labradors. So we have a lot of dogs, and I raise registered Angus cattle. I ride horses still. We both ride horses still. Fox hunt. We stay busy. I mean, pretty much when the sun's up, we're out, and we come in when the sun goes down, and we're outside all the time, which I love. That was the only bad thing about being in the office, was I'd look out the window, and in the old days, the window would open and you could at least feel when it was nice outside. Then the modern buildings got built and the windows don't open anymore. And I was staring out the window a lot saying, gosh, I wish I could go back out and be outside. Now, when it was 0 degrees, it was a little cold being outside. And when it's pouring down rain, it's a little wet being outside. But I still, for the last chapter of my life, I really enjoy being out and being in nature.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with my potential listeners here?
Well, if anyone is listening to us, all I can say is the reason this company is successful is because we have fabulous people, and companies without great people will never be great companies. And I think everybody that's part of our team, we are a family business. And even when we're big, we try and keep a family feel as much as we can. And the only times we've gotten away from it, we've seen it, I hope, quickly, and we get back to it again. And that's part of the magic of Ingram. And again, I thank everybody that's part of our team. Thanks for listening.
I'm very happy to be a part of that very team, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
See you later.
All right.
Thanks.